Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, we return to Venice, and we find the weapon of the urban Dianic cult. In Edgecombe Stanley's biography of the Dogeresses of Venice, the next incident of note was the rise of Charlemagne. Stanley's history is poor, however, because he doesn't mention that Pepin, the son of Charlemagne, tried to invade the city on his father's orders, which led to the seat of power moving to the modern site. Charlemagne explicitly says that although he is the rightful heir to the Roman Empire, its territories don't include Venice, which belongs to the Emperor of the East. There are a few useful plot hooks that we can glean from this part of Stanley. Time for a quote. The Franks shared the sporting instincts of the Venetians, and they were emulous of the boasts of the men of Venice. One can catch more fish in a month in the lagoons than in the whole year in the Mediterranean, and one can entrap more birds at Malamocco than anywhere else in Italy. Grebe shooting was a favourite pastime, and ladies entered into the sport quite as enthusiastically as their lords. Crossbows and clay pellets were the weapons, snaring was banned as unsportsmanlike, and heads were nailed on barn doors as trophies. Let's move away from the quote. In reference to this, I'd like to point back to episode 63, which was about ortolans, the bird so good to eat that one hides from God to eat it. I presume they kept grebe heads as trophies because the greater crested grebe has prominent feathers. Grebes were almost hunted to extinction in the UK because of these feathers, which were popular on hats and undergarments. I'm not familiar with any relevant mythology about grebes. There is a tribe of Russian witches who can turn into grebes, but that's a distant recollection, and I doubt it's a meaningful connection here. Here we have women skilled in firing clay pellets from a crossbow. I note that in Ars Magica it's permitted for potions to be fired in ampules, and poisons are very skillfully brewed in a city filled with alchemists. If we combine this with the previously noted property of Venetian women's hair to increase the range and durability of siege weapons, and, by extension, other weapons, we begin to see a sacred weapon for the urban Dianic cult forming. Do they use bolero, the perfumed balls we discussed previously that were popularized by the rotting princess, as poisonous and magical projectiles? Back to Edgecombe Stanley. Whilst Charlemagne and his courtiers were pleased to meet the Venetians in sport, or when on marriage bent, he and they never quite concealed their designs upon the lagoons. The monarch's chagrin was bitter when he was forced to admit the impossibility of success. "As my brand sinks out of sight, nor ever shall appear to me again, so let all thoughts of seizing Venice vanish from my will," he once exclaimed as, standing upon his royal galley off the coast of Padua, he cast his sword far, far away out to sea. This was not his favourite sword, of course. To step away from Edgecombe Stanley again, it was a representation of his ambition to take Venice, so should it be recovered, it would be a valuable vessel for enchantment. From here we follow the story of the first Dogeressa. It doesn't have a lot of relevance to Ars Magica, but as the following episodes describe many of the holders of that role, we need to mark the beginning, at least briefly. Back to Stanley again. The first actual Dogeressa, not merely the wife of the Doge, but First Lady of Venice, and his official consort was a French woman, the Countess Carola, a lady of honour of the court of Aix-la-Chapelle. Bellario Anatorio and his brother Beato, who was associated with him in the Dojado, were guests of Charlemagne at Aix, and there the Doge saw and wooed his bride. How they got there nobody knows. It was a stupendous journey in those days. The Emperor approved the match and promised his friendship and protection for the island republic. Carola was a woman of great energy of character, remarkable for the exercise of strong will, and endowed with the faculty of attracting respect and obedience. She had a difficult role, for the ladies of Venice resented the introduction of a Frenchwoman as consort for their Doge. Beato Anatorio, it appears, played a double part, for whilst acting as best man to his brother and paying court to Countess Carola, he was negotiating with the Emperor of Constantinople for a union with a Byzantine princess, with a view to supplant the Doge and Dogeressa. Corolla very soon took the measure of Beato's perfidy, and when he brought his imperial bride to Venice, she adroitly placed Valentino, her husband's youngest brother, an attractive youth, in the young girl's way. There was little love lost between Beato and Cassandra, and the brothers very soon became estranged. And thus the Dogeressa held her own triumphantly. The story goes, however, that, consistent with women's ever-changing mood, having set Beato against his wife, the Dogeressa became her rival in affections of Valentino. Obalario Antitorio, who had been the tribune of Malamocco, was an indolent man, irresolute, faithless, and when a Greek fleet approached the lagoons with peaceful intentions, but viewed by the Doge as supporting the pretensions of his brother, he had recourse to the French court for assistance. This was regarded by the Greeks as an hostile act, and they attacked and destroyed Heraclea, Gisolo, Fosoni, Chogia, and other Venetian ports. The chief men of Venice were slain or taken captive, and Obalario and Bennato Annatorio were carried away as hostages to Constantinople, where they and their wives, Corolla and Cassandra, died. Next month, when we revisit Venice, we find the strange forest of the urban Dianic cult. Your saga may vary.